Hi, Whitney. This is Dr. Alex Stewart, and your real estate agent, Patty, hired me to do an analysis on the condo that you are going to be selling to help make sure that we're pricing it as appropriately as we can and to just get an independent perspective on the whole thing, because I don't have any incentives as to whether you sell this or not. I'm simply just looking at the numbers and helping us to have an objective point of view on this, right? And so, again, just a little quick background on me and why I'm involved in this at all is I started a company called The Market Distillery. And Patty is a part of that company's coaching program that essentially is designed to help real estate agents objectively look at the markets, get the data, and help their clients make informed decisions when it comes to real estate. I was previously an analyst for the Home Depot and Georgia Pacific in their financial doings, and I worked as a mortgage banker for 8 years where I helped nearly 1,000 families finance their home purchase. But most importantly, I worked right alongside appraisers during that process and really understood how they valued homes, how they looked at the market and things along those lines. And so put all that together, and that is what you're going to get from me today. But it's going to be, in my opinion, even better than an appraisal because I'm going to walk you through it. I'm going to make it make sense rather than just giving you a PDF report and saying, good luck, here's the value, hope you enjoy it. So this is going to be broken into 5 different parts. We're going to go over your property's details to make sure that we've got all those correct. We're going to then jump into a general market overview for Northeast Florida. We're going to then zoom in to this condo complex and the condos around it nearby to give you a neighborhood update. We're going to go over some specific comparable listings and sales, and then finally end with a recommended pricing plan. So let's start with the property details. The property that you own that you're selling is going to be 4915 Baymeadows. This is Unit 1C, and this is in the 32217 zip code. It's a condo in the Boxwood, and it's one of the larger units at 1,996 square feet. It's a 4-bed, 2.5 bath. There's a community pool, but it doesn't have a private pool per se. And the view is that of a second story because it is a second story unit. Now, I rate these properties the same way an appraiser classifies them, and that's using quality and condition, with 1 being the best and 6 being the worst. So the quality of this comes in at a Q5, and what that means is it's not a custom home. It's not a luxury finished condo. This is an entry-level condo that is got similar plan and features to all the other units in the building. And the hard part about that is it just makes it a little more interchangeable. People can be a little bit more price shoppy with this kind of a situation than they can with a house that's going to have a unique location or a unique floor plan or can have better finishes, things like that. The condition tells us essentially how many repairs are needed, things like that. And this comes in at a C3, which is pretty good. It's not brand new. It's not fully remodeled, but there's no major deficiencies anywhere. There's nothing that I know of, that I'm aware of, that would say we really have to repair this property. It's in bad shape. There's no major updates that have been done to the property in the last year or two. And the one thing that I would note is the HOA is roughly $430 a month from what I can see from the other units in this complex. Okay. Now, first things first, let's look at Northeast Florida to get a sense of where this market is in general. And one of the big factors that's playing and will potentially play a role in your sale is mortgage rates. Now, they've come down from where they were here in August. They're more like now 6.25%. Which is really good because that potentially is going to boost affordability and get people interested in buying homes that maybe were a little bit more on the fence. 25% of the sales are cash. Now, I did note that the one recent sale that we've had in this complex was cash, so it's entirely possible that you could be facing a situation where you need a cash buyer. That's one of the things that I would suggest that you and Patty further investigate with a lender is financing possible in this complex, because sometimes the HOAs have things going on that limit the ability to get a loan approved, and that can limit the number of people that can actually buy your house. So we need to know that. And there's this big theme of there's more inventory on the market than we've seen in the last few years. Now, we're coming from nearly selling out of homes in Jacksonville back in 2021. So it feels weird. It's like you just went back to the gym for the first time and you're really, really sore. It feels weird. 10,000 is really not that much in the grand scheme of things, but it's a lot more than we have had recently. And the market's dealing with the growing pains associated with having more inventory on the market, along with rates being higher. Okay, but we still are seeing a decent amount of sales. We still are seeing properties, move. It's just in many cases all about, did they have the right price? Oops. Now, we can't predict interest rates, but what we can do is we can look at these seasonal trends that happen in our local real estate market and get a really good idea of what to expect in the coming months, because our real estate market is surprisingly predictable when you know that every year people are out of school in the summer, and so more transactions happen then. We know that the weather gets colder and we lose daylight at the end of the year. We know the holidays come in. There's a lot of these predictable things that happen that influence our real estate market locally. And so the first thing we're going to look at is active listings. And here the blue line is the historical seasonal pattern. It's 20 years of history that's been averaged out by month to see how do we normally see inventory move. Now, really, you don't need to focus too much on the numbers per se, focus on the direction. But normally we see inventory is at its lowest point in January. This makes sense because everybody pulls their home off the market for the holidays. But then it ramps up through the spring, peaks in the summer/fall, and then starts to fall again towards the holidays. We saw a much faster rise in inventory at the first part of this year, and that has created extra pressure on sellers. It's since come down, which is good, but that is something that we are watching because we just got to be mindful of, if more properties continue to come on the market, it can create even more price pressure for sellers. And this is the balance that a lot of sellers have been dealing with is they feel like the market is similar to what it was a few years ago, but it's actually changed a decent amount as it's normalizing, and the power between buyers and sellers is sort of evening out. If we look at pending sales, this gives us the most live look at demand, buyers going under contracts on homes. And you can see that most of the action happens in the first half of the year, and it starts to fade as we get into fall. And that's where we are, because this is August's number. We're waiting for September's number to come out. At the time of this recording, it's not published yet, but it should be lower, should be under 2,000. And you can see that there's not really a lot of reason to believe that we'll see a big boost in home sales towards the end of the year necessarily, as buyers typically step away from the market and come back again in the beginning of next year. As we look at prices, we can see that I can't compare historical prices to today's prices, because today's prices are well above that just based on how they've grown. But what I can do is index them together and see how do they normally change. And so here we can see that normally prices rise about 14% from January to June, and then they fall in the fall. And then there's a small bump at the end of the year, because that's when a lot of new construction homes actually close out. But this year, sellers have not been able to really push price growth like they have in normal years because of that increase in supply. And so we are in a situation where you can't really push the market on price. You got to take what the market's showing you and giving you, and potentially, given that we see prices normally fall in the fall, we might need to price under where the market shows us it was earlier in the year, because we don't want to be pricing it above the market and have your home sit knowing that you want to make sure that this thing sells. Now, finally, this talks about the value of getting the price right up front. And what it is showing you is a breakdown of how many homes sold in August that were on the market from 0 to 30 days. So they sold in the first 1 month. Now, on average, if they got the price right and they sold it in the first month, buyers stepped up and bought, because you can see that the vast majority of homes sold within 30 days, which is encouraging, because it means that the buyers will step up and make a purchase if the home is priced appropriately. On top of that, the sellers only had to negotiate about 3% off of their original list price, and the average concession that they gave was $8,000. Okay, now if you see, the longer the home sits, which is these other bars, you'll see that the seller has had to give up more and more to get the home sold. And this is just showing you that as the home sits, buyers start to get a little more aggressive on their offers. They start to realize that maybe the seller might be a little more desperate the longer this thing sits on the market. And the seller ultimately will get less than if they had priced the home right up front. On top of this, the concessions, while they're not dramatic here, normally we do see an increase in the amount of concessions that sellers have to offer as well, in addition to price reductions. So you got the cost of owning the property, you got to reduce your price, and you got to give more concessions typically the longer it sits. So I look at these stats, and these are always why I really emphasize we got to get this home price right when it hits the market instead of trying a high price and seeing if it works and then reducing it down. As we go into a neighborhood update, what I am looking at is condos in 32217 and 32257, these two neighboring zip codes. Your condo is right on the border of these two zip codes, so I pulled them both. And it shows us that while that's Jacksonville, let's talk about condos nearby because that's an even more relevant market for you. And as you can see here, we have seen just a march higher in the average number of condos on the market in this area over the years to where we are now almost 4 times as high in terms of the number of listings as we were back in 22. And a lot of this has to do with the Surfside collapse in Miami that brought in new condo regulation for the entire state. Now, your condo is not coastal and it's not over 3 stories. So the irony here is that your condo is not really subject to a lot of the new regulations that came in. But what's happening right now is condos are getting a bad name. People are essentially just doing a broad stroke and saying, I don't want a condo because condos, the HOAs are expensive. You don't get a lot for what you're paying for. And, the prices are too high or whatever it is. Right. And so your condo, I think, is going to get lumped in with that because that's happening overall. And the other thing that happens is real estate agents steer their clients away from condos, knowing that stuff is going on. Now, the pros, the really good agents, are directing their clients to the right condo complexes. But unfortunately, you're going to get caught up in this overall trend. And so you can see inventory is rising while while closings are slowing down. So we've only averaged about 9 sales a month in condos in these 2 zip codes in total. I'm not stripping it down to price point. I'm not doing any of that. It's just total. Okay, and this is creating price pressure, okay? Especially as you look at how the average sales price has changed, we are seeing that it was going steady until this year. And now all of a sudden condos are down 20% in these 2 zip codes. Now, some of this could be a mix of what's selling, right? So if smaller condos are selling more, that can naturally cause the price to go down because it looks like the price is going down, but what it really is that cheaper condos are selling. And I do think that some of that's happening as we'll look at in another slide. But this is something that tells you that prices are not rising, prices are falling, and that we need to be aware of this moving forward as we plan for this sale. A couple of other pieces of information that really paint a stark picture here is how much sellers are having to negotiate on these condos. So while the overall market is sitting at about 94% so far this year, condos in these 2 zip codes are at 87. That means you put the house on the market and the sellers are reducing it 13% to get it sold on average. That's a big number. And that tells you just how many people are pricing these condos based on last year's numbers. But as we saw, the prices are going down. We got to price it for today's market. And that will avoid having to reduce the price so much to get it sold. The other thing is happening is these condos are sitting longer. So again, your carrying costs of owning the property rise, the chance for having things break while the property is being viewed or just on the market goes up. And so just manage your expectations that selling this condo is not going to be necessarily the easiest thing, especially given where we're going in the seasons and what we're seeing in this condo market. And one of the questions I needed to ask is, do bigger condos warrant better pricing, right? Do they have more demand? Because your condo at just under 2,000 square feet is something where you have a tendency to think, okay, it's bigger, so we should be able to get a higher price for it. But we need to look at where the demand is. And when I pulled just so far this year, all of the condo sales in the 2 zip codes that we talked about, the vast majority of sales are happening in condos that are 800 to 1,600 square feet. As soon as you get up to the 1,800 to 2,000, there's only been 3 condos that have sold at that size, which tells me that the buyers are looking for the more affordable condos. They are buying smaller condos at lower price points to get more affordability in most cases. And so that tells me that there could be limited demand for a bigger condo, and that we need to be mindful of that as we go in and price this home specifically. So let's look at a few specific houses. I've pulled all of the condos in the complex that are on the market or have sold since the beginning of this year. And we can see that there are currently 5 active listings and 1 sale. Okay, so this right there is a red flag just from the standpoint of 5 active listings is a decent number of active listings in the same building. I think there's only 100 units in this building. Okay, so that is 5% of it is for sale and only 1 has sold. So it's telling us you got competition when you do go on this market. Now, all of the units are smaller than you. So the good news is you at least stand out at having a different floor plan, a different sized unit, which makes yours unique. And that makes it less of a commodity. You're not going up as much head to head as these. Now, I've color coded these based on first story, second story, because I think that sometimes buyers want first story so they can more easily move in, so they don't have to do the stairs every day. And I just wanted to see what we had. And so the only thing that has sold was on the first story. And there's a mix of both first and second story listings out here, right? And so with yours being on the second story, you got 3 other houses competing against you. And as we look at this, these houses are sitting. There's a couple that have been on the market for about a month, 1 for 2 months, and then you get some that are 100 plus days on market. These are all averaging about $130, $135, $140 a foot. And you can see here that the pricing is all under $170. Okay, so that gives you an idea of where this is. We have not seen too tremendous of price reductions, which tells you that these sellers are sort of holding out, right? This one went from 162.5 to 160. For 173 days, they're sort of just saying, hey, I hope somebody buys it at my price. At 114 days, they have dropped it $10K, which is a decent price reduction, but they haven't gotten the house sold yet. So this tells you may not be enough. These other ones are basically at their list price. So this is telling you that these sellers, are not being super aggressive. The good news is that means that you're not going to get undercut too aggressively. That pricing in this complex may be a little more stable, because if nobody sells at lower price points, then you end up sort of saving the pricing of the whole complex. Okay, now let's look at the one that sold. It's a 2-2-8. It's about 1,000 square feet. Sold for $142 a foot. It was only on the market for 24 days, and it sold at $154. Okay, so they took a pretty good haircut to get this sold quickly, which means there was an interested buyer. They came along. They gave them a relatively low offer, and this seller worked with them to make it happen and sold it about 89% of what they were listed at. Okay, so that also tells you the kind of experience you might get. You might put the house on and get an offer, and you might need to work with that offer if you really want to sell the house, because you may not get too many opportunities to actually find a buyer that will purchase the home. Okay, a lot of sellers, they assume if they get one offer that another one's coming, and we're finding in this market that if you get an opportunity to sell the home, you might want to do your best to make that work. Let's look at the specific houses. Here is an active unit in the complex. It's the largest active unit at 1,456 square foot. It's listed at 169,999, which is 117 a square foot. That's actually a really low number per square foot, and they're trying to stay under that 170 mark. This, to me, is your most direct competition, because if somebody wanted a house that was of a bigger size, then they would go with this property. And it's decently upgraded. I mean, it's not really updated, but it's not what I would call outdated either. Now it's got white appliances, and maybe when you're in this unit, it might feel older, but it is on the second story. It's got the community pool just like you, and I would argue it's a pretty similar home. Okay, so it's a relevant comp. As we look at I wanted to see, because a buyer looking for a condo might not only buy in your complex, they might look at other condos nearby. And so I pulled this this sold house so that we could see maybe what other people are buying in this square footage. Okay, so this one is 1,800 and it sold for $189. It was $104 a square foot, and it was on the market for 54 days. Now it's noteworthy, the HOA is a decent amount more, $300 a month more per month. So that is a hefty cost that offsets a lot of purchase price. And when you look at this thing, it is definitely dated, but it is sort of a different kind of feel. It doesn't really look like a traditional condo. It's not, you kind of have your own entrance. So it's a little different, right? It's almost like an attached house, maybe a townhome kind of feel, but it still is technically a condo. And so this gives us an idea of, okay, 104 a foot. It's a little more outdated, so maybe you can get above that, but this is pretty relevant. And then here's the unit that's sold in your complex, right? 1,000 square feet. It's a 2.2, first story, Q5C3. It looks, though, pretty updated. And what I mean by that is it's modern. Now, it's very neutral, very gray and white, but that appeals to a lot of people because it is not off-putting. It's very neutral. A lot of people like this look. It's staged in person, from what I can tell. So they've done a really good job of presenting it in its best light, and it's sold quickly. And so I think that might also inform you on the strategy to take with your house. It might make sense to stage your property for a faster sale. And this sold for $143 a foot, so a lot more per foot than these others. But I think that's simply because it's a smaller unit, so you're able to get a higher price per foot on smaller units than you are on bigger units. Now, if we visualize sort of the active listings and the one sold listing, which is this blue one, within your complex, you can kind of see where everybody lands. Everybody's pricing around $140 a foot on these smaller units. And then there's the one bigger one at $117 a foot. And so to me, I think if you put the house on the market, the question is really, how does yours directly compare to this $117 a foot? Because if somebody wants a little bit of a larger one, they're going to compare yours and this one. So I kind of feel like you got to come in under where this one is. Okay. So with that, I've built a pricing plan for you. And the way that I look at this is I start with property advantages. You have a larger unit, it's well maintained, and the monthly HOA isn't too high when it comes to condos. Okay. Now the challenge is you have a market for condos that's under some significant pressure. And your property is limited on updates. It's not outdated, but it's also not updated. We are seeing that the smaller condos seem to be getting more traction, probably due to buyers trying to find affordable housing. Okay, so this puts me at about 110 a square foot on my pricing, but we are entering that slower seasonal market in the fall. So a lot of this depends on when you want to list it and what your urgency is. So I have 3 pricing scenarios for you based on that. If you have a high level of urgency to sell and or there's low demand, then I recommend you selling this house and listing it at $180 to $199, right? Probably try the $199 mark. That's $99 a foot. And I know that might feel a little bit low, but as you just saw, at 117, 110, we got a price to sell, price where the market's going, not price where it is today. And the market is probably going to go lower in the fall as it normally does. Now, if there's medium urgency to sell, you're not really in too big of a rush, or you feel like maybe interest rates are picking up demand and people might look at this, well then, okay, maybe 200 to 219 would make sense. And this is 100 to 109 a foot. And then lastly, if you have really low urgency to sell this thing, you just want to put it on the market, see what happens, or we see a large pickup in demand from lower interest rates or whatever reason, then you'd be looking at more of a 220 to 239 range, which puts you at 110 to 120 a square foot. So I hope that this helps in painting the picture of where this market is, of being able to see what the competition looks like, and having a clear plan of where to put this home on the market depending on your urgency and the market timing. So good luck with this. If you have any questions at all, the best next step is to get with Patty and to review this and strategize and make sure that you guys are on the same page and come out with a clear plan. I hope you have good luck with selling this, and I'll talk to you later.